So creating a new local branch is not what we want here. Therefore, let's clear this first. And let's now have a look at our structure once again, as we saw it on the slide. And before we do that, maybe let's check out our feature branch to leave the detached head state. So now things are all right. So the goal now is to create a local tracking branch which is connected to this remote tracking branch in the end. And for this, we also have a command, and that's called git branch, because in the end, we want to create a new branch, but not a local branch. We want to create a local tracking branch, so we add -- track here. Now we have to add the branch's name, and I will call it feature remote local. And a little hint here, this is not how it's supposed to be named. I just do it as a first step so that you can see that this is our local tracking branch, but we'll have to revert this change soon. Let's just go like this for the moment, and then let's see why this is not the right way to do it. And now where should this be retrieved from? Well, from origin / feature remote. You can omit the remotes here. If you do this, you see that we created a new branch, but it's set up to track the remote branch feature remote from origin. Now, if we check all our branches once again, -a, you see we have this feature remote local branch here. And with that, our structure that we saw on the slide is complete. Feature remote local is now our local tracking branch. This branch tracks or is connected to the remote tracking branch feature remote that we created, and this branch is then a copy of the remote branch that we have on Git. With that, we have kind of a closed environment, so to say, and this means we can now fetch, merge, and push, or pull and push our information in our branch. Let me show you how this works now. Let me first check out feature remote local, right? First thing you see is we of course have our latest changes incorporated in here, just as we have it in our remote tracking branch. Let me now create a new file, and let's say local tracking branch .text, like this. Let me now just add this change. As we know how these things work, let's commit this change, added file in local tracking branch. Let's commit this. Very nice. If we now, I forgot the name again, getting old. If we now check out our remote tracking branch, so this red one, you see this change is not incorporated. If we check out our feature remote local branch, this change is of course there. So what we can now do is we can simply run git push. Very important, not push origin and then the branch name. We just run git push here. As I said, we are kind of in a closed environment here. So with git push, Git knows already that we want to update our remote tracking branch. And with that, this remote tracking branch will bring these updates to our remote branch on GitHub. Let's do this now. And now we have a problem here. Because as you can see that the upstream branch of your current branch does not match the name of your current branch. Now what does this mean basically? Our local tracking branch and the remote tracking branch are not named equally. Now you could override these changes, as you can see it right here with this command, but the better approach is, and that's why I showed it to you, keep things in line. Because otherwise, nobody understands what's happening. And if you again check our git branch -a command, you see that our local tracking branch is highlighted in this green manner, whereas our remote tracking branch is red, so you can differentiate these two. What we should do now is, we should check out our feature branch here, and then simply say git branch -d feature remote local. Right? So we can simply delete this branch, as we learned it. And I forgot to add the capital D here to force this, sorry about this. So let's add git branch -d here, feature remote local. Like this now. Now we deleted this branch. And now we'll just create the branch again, git branch -- track. And it should be called feature remote here. And it should be based on origin / feature remote this. Now we have again our tracking branch. You can see this right here. And now we switch to this branch, feature remote. And now we add this file again. Let's do it like this. Add it to the local tracking branch.txt, right? Let's now add and commit this change. Added file to local tracking branch. And now, as I said, we can just use git push, and now things are working perfectly. As you can see, we update our remote tracking branch, and we also bring the change to GitHub. Let me prove this to you. If we go to GitHub now, and we load it here, you see we added this file to GitHub. Same thing, by the way, can now also be done with git pull, for example. So if you create another file here, file3.txt, just a simple file. Let's say added file3, right? And let's commit this in the feature remote branch right here. So we have this new file in here. And if we now switch back to VS Code, and now simply run, that's important, we are still in our feature remote branch here. If you just run git pull, you see the data is updated and file3.txt is in here. With that, we set up a very good flow, as I would say, between our different branches, and you now also see how this concept of remote branches, remote tracking branches, and local tracking branches works. One last thing maybe, if you want to see if you have a normal local branch or a local tracking branch, because in here, in git branch, all these branches are, well, kind of written in the same way, so green if selected, and then it's just white text. But if you run git branch -vv, so 2 v's here, then you see more details about your branches. The feature branch and the master branch are just normal local branches. But for the feature remote branch, you see that this is a local tracking branch as it tracks origin/feature remote. And what is origin/feature remote? Well, if you again run git branch -r, origin feature remote is our remote tracking branch. So this is how things are connected here. Now, of course, you could just say, I just want to push and pull somehow, and I don't want to know how this exactly works. But I think it's crucial to understand these different Git concepts to see how Git manages the connection between our GitHub and our Git environment. Because as I said, a remote and a local branch don't have any direct connection. Therefore, understanding remote tracking branches and local tracking branches is very, very important in my opinion. However, these were many commands to remember, I guess, and I wouldn't recommend to remember these because if you play around and if you work with Git and GitHub, you get used to these. But in the next lecture, I want to give you a quick summary of the core commands used in here. We recreated the structure in the last lecture basically, but which commands did we use and which part of that construct here were they applied to? Well, one very important command, which we didn't use so far by the way, is git remote. Git remote shows you your current remote servers. Let me quickly show this to you. So with git remote, you see currently we have one remote server here, our origin server. Didn't use this so far, but that's just helpful in case you're running multiple of these servers. Besides git remote, we have commands related to the branches itself. With git branch -a, we get a list of all branches. All branches here doesn't mean remote branches, you saw this. It means all local tracking branches, and remote tracking branches. If you want to see all remote tracking branches, you can run git branch -r. And if you want to see more details about your current configuration, you can run git remote show origin. This is also something we didn't cover so far, so let's switch back once again. So with git remote show origin, you get information about your remote branches that we track with the remote tracking branches. You get information how you configured git pull and so on, so you can find out more about your current environment you're working in and the GitHub connection you have. For example, you can also see the pushed URL, so the server you're pushing data to. That's what this command is all about. And then rather related to our local tracking branches, we had git branch -vv. This gives you a list of local tracking branches and the remotes, and of course also of the local branches which are not tracking branches as you saw it. This was the part in the square brackets where we had this reference to the remote tracking branch in the end. And finally, we have git branch --track, then your branch name you want to have, and then the remote tracking branch you want to track actually. That creates a local tracking branch. As you saw in the video, it is highly recommended to align the name of the local tracking branch and the remote tracking branch to avoid any kind of further problems. With that, we had a very close look at this approach here. So how can we create a new repository in GitHub, then have it locally and then play around with it. But we also had this option here. So if we have an existing repository in GitHub and we want to get this to our local environment. So how can we clone a repository?